The Archive of Forgotten Things, Part 4, The Hollow Memory. Sam didn't try to leave the motel again, not because he didn't want to, but because by now he knew there wasn't a motel. The peeling walls, the humming fridge, the flickering bathroom light, they were only decorations, a set built around him, a performance for a single actor who refused to accept his role. Because the truth had finally sunk in, he was already inside the archive. Every object, every shelf, every forgotten thing, he was walking among his own fragmented mind. He stared at the note again. You left the door open. It didn't feel like a threat. It didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a warning. On the sixth night, a new sound came. It wasn't knocking. It was scraping. From the other side of the motel wall, something dragged its fingers or claws, or worse, across the inside of the drywall. Not above, not behind. Inside. Slow, deliberate, as if tracing a shape or letters. He pressed his ear against the wall and listened. A whisper slipped through, muffled by insulation and distance. Do you remember what you did to her, Sam? He pulled back. He didn't know who her was, but the guilt hit anyway. He didn't sleep. Instead, he sat at the table, staring at the single object that had appeared overnight, a small wooden box. He hadn't seen it before, but he knew it. It was the box that held the ring, not a wedding ring. No, that was never in his story, but an engagement ring, one he never gave. He bought it when he was 23. Her name was Mara. He forgot how she smelled, but he remembered how she cried the night he disappeared on her. Not physically, emotionally. He just stopped showing up, ghosted her, not out of malice, not fear. He just couldn't explain what had changed in him. He forgot why, but the archive hadn't. He opened the box. Inside was no ring, just a tooth, human, still wet, fresh. And beneath it, etched in the wood, "You chewed through the leash, Sam. Now bite." He flung the box across the room, but the second he looked away, it was back on the table. The walls began to peel in earnest now, not metaphorically, literally. Behind the wallpaper, behind the drywall, rows of shelves, some with glowing objects, some with faces. Faces pressed against the wood, mouths open in silent screams, people frozen in the moment of forgetting. The archive didn't just store things, it preserved people, and not all of them were dead. Then came the final change. The door disappeared, the window turned into a screen, and the screen showed a camera feed of himself, sitting exactly where he sat, staring into it, and behind him, row after row of shelves slowly taking shape behind his silhouette, filling in. The archive was no longer a place he visited. It was a parasite, building itself from inside him, a replica of his inner world. A library of grief. He ran to the bathroom to break the mirror, but the mirror was gone. In its place, etched into the tile with fingernails, was a list. Forgotten. Your mother's voice. The taste of ocean salt. The scream before the fall. Her name. The sound of real silence. That's when he saw the door again. The archive door, from the site, standing free in the center of the room, unattached to anything. Just the black frame and knob, flickering around the edges like an old VHS effect. On the surface, a new phrase burned in heat-distorted lettering. Enter to catalog, enter to forget, enter to become. He didn't want to, but the room pushed him. The walls bent, the floor cracked like old vinyl. He stepped through. On the other side was not the archive, not exactly. It was a waiting room. Linoleum floors, fluorescent lighting that buzzed too fast, like the hum of a beehive, a receptionist's desk made of flesh and metal. No receptionist, just a small bell with a sign, ring to confirm your memory. He didn't. He waited. Until a door opened behind the desk and a man stepped out, but the man was Sam. Or an older version of him. Gray in the eyes, missing a tooth, wearing a name tag that simply said curator. The older Sam spoke, and his voice was several seconds delayed, as if dubbed over poorly. "We finally have enough, don't we?" Sam backed away, shook his head. "You thought forgetting was freedom, but forgetting is just storage, and every archive needs a keeper." He gestured toward the shelves that had reappeared around them. "You kept giving us more, and now we're almost full." The walls trembled. Light flickered. And then the ceiling collapsed. But instead of rubble, down fell objects. Millions of them. Photos, toys, blood-soaked diaries, torn letters, bones, ticket stubs, teeth. Memories people wanted to forget. And among them, people, trapped inside their own forgotten moments, their mouths opening and closing silently like fish in a tank. Sam turned to run, but the floor was gone. He fell into the shelves. He doesn't remember hitting the bottom, just that he landed on something soft, a pile of clothing, his own, layer upon layer of old shirts, jackets, shoes, socks, decades worth. Each time he forgot who he was for a little while, a piece of him was folded and shelved. Now it was all back, too much Sam to carry. And rising above the pile came a sound, a familiar voice. Mara, I looked for you. You didn't disappear, you drifted. You let the archive take you before you even knew what it was. He turned, desperate, calling her name, but she was already gone. And in her place stood another door, not labeled, just waiting. He opened it, and he was back at the desk, the original desk. The website interface now stretched across the walls. The site no longer needed a screen. He was in it. And the desk held one final object, a mirror. This time when he looked into it, he didn't see himself shredding. He saw the next person, sitting at their desk, their webcam on, their mouth slightly open, about to speak his name. Somewhere outside of the archive in the regular world, a new user is browsing obscure corners of the internet. They stumble upon a link on an old message board. The archive of forgotten things. They click. A dim room appears, a desk, a shelf, a single item flickers into view, a photo of Sam, smiling, and behind him in the mirror, something watching, something waiting, seeing someone else on the other side. The archive of forgotten things. Part 5, We Never Leave Empty-Handed. Sam stared into the mirror and watched the other person move. They were seated at their desk, young, confused, browsing. Their webcam was on and they hadn't realized it. A small tab on their screen displayed the title, The Archive of Forgotten Things. Sam opened his mouth trying to warn them, but he had no voice anymore, only static. The figure on the other side leaned in closer, looked right at him, and then with a click, they closed the tab. The mirror went black. The archive shifted. Shelves folded in on themselves like origami. Objects began melting, rearranging, morphing into new memories, new things, not his. The archive was preparing for its next host. It was done with Sam, but it didn't let anything go without a trade. From behind him, a heavy breath fogged the air. He turned. The curator stood there again, his own future self, or the version of him the archive wanted him to become. But now his eyes were empty sockets, and black ink dripped from his fingertips. We never leave empty-handed, Sam, the curator said softly. We leave behind the parts of us we love the most. He reached into his coat and pulled out a glowing object. Sam's heart dropped. It was a locket, Mara's. He remembered now. He hadn't just ghosted her. He left her on the side of the road. He was driving. She was crying. He was yelling. He told her to get out, just for a minute, just to calm down. He drove off. He told himself he'd circle back, but he didn't. And he never told anyone. And now the locket was pulsing, alive, screaming without sound. The archive kept it for you, the curator whispered. You don't deserve to forget, but we're kind here. We take the guilt, we store it. All you have to do is sit down. A chair appeared, identical to the one he first saw when the archive began building itself, the keeper's chair. Sam backed away, but the floor fell out beneath him again. He landed on his knees in a new room. Everything here was white. No shelves, no objects, just doors. Thousands of them, floating in space, all closed, all numbered. And behind each one, he felt a memory, not just his own. Everyone's whispers leaked from the seams. She screamed when they took her. I didn't mean to leave him in the car. He asked me to stop, and I didn't. We were kids. We didn't know it would be the last time. Sam fell to his knees, covered his ears, but the archive spoke directly into his head now. You were never the only one. You're just the only one who opened the door wide enough to let us all in. And in front of him, the final door appeared. Not numbered, just labeled in handwriting carved like scars. You do not leave. He could feel it pulling him forward. Inside, he knew, was the thing behind the archive. The origin, the seed, the first object ever forgotten, the moment where all this began. He reached for the handle. Inside was a room smaller than he expected. Cramped. Dusty. A child's bedroom. His. The wallpaper was dinosaurs. The bed still had the stuffed dog. Benny, and on the bed, a boy. 6 years old, curled up, shaking. Sam stepped forward. The boy turned. It was him. A moment locked in time. The night his mother died, no one ever told him how, just that she went to sleep and didn't wake up. But that wasn't true. He heard it. He saw her fall. He watched them take her out of the house in a black bag. But everyone told him, "You're too young. Forget it happened. Forget it." So he did. This was the first memory he ever buried. The first brick in the archive. And now he was back here. He reached toward the boy, trying to touch his shoulder. The moment he made contact, everything cracked. The bedroom shattered like glass. He was falling again, through shelves, through years, through every version of himself. And then, silence. He woke up back at the desk, the real desk, in his real apartment, the laptop in front of him, open, logged in, no weird website, no archive, just his desktop. He stared in disbelief, ran to the mirror. His reflection was normal. No ink, no blood, no shelves. Was it all a dream? Then, a ping. He turned back to the laptop. An email notification to Sam Whitaker, subject transfer confirmed. Body, thank you for your service. A new host has been selected. Your archive has been processed. You are now free. Sam didn't know what to believe. He closed the laptop, got up, took a walk for the first time in weeks. Sunlight, noise, people. It all felt distant but real. He smiled, but when he got back home, there was a package at the door, no return address. He brought it inside, opened it. Inside, a single object, a VHS tape labeled "Do Not Play," and underneath it, a sticky note, familiar handwriting, his own. "We always leave something behind." Cut. The archive of forgotten things, while part play to remember. Sam sat on the floor, the unopened VHS tape resting in his lap like a loaded weapon. He didn't own a VCR. He hadn't for years. But part of him knew that wouldn't be a problem, because when he turned around, it was already there. An old Zenith TV set, dusty, plugged in, already on, blue screen glowing softly, a VCR humming beneath it as if it had been waiting, not just in his apartment, but in his timeline. He slid the tape in. His hands were shaking, and when he pressed play, the screen didn't show static. It showed him, sitting in the motel, wearing the same shirt he was wearing right now. The footage was black and white, grainy but unmistakable. He watched himself look into the camera, eyes hollow, lips barely moving. If you're watching this, it means you made it out. But you didn't escape. You were released, so we could grow. The screen flashed. Now it showed people. Thousands, maybe more. Each seated at a desk, each with a single object in front of them, each whispering. Some were children, some elderly, some were missing faces, just blurred smudges where identity should have been. The archive was never a place. It's not a building, not a site, not even a memory. It's a disease. It spreads through forgetting. The screen flickered again. Now it showed Mara, sitting in a hospital bed, hooked up to IVs, head shaved, smiling softly. A nurse walked in and said, "Memory loss is progressing, another case of archive syndrome. Make sure they don't remember. That's what feeds it." The tape cut. Now the screen was filled with symbols, impossible geometric shapes, spiraling lines that bent space around them. Sam felt his nose bleed just trying to make sense of them. Behind those symbols, voices, chanting, his own voice among them, repeating a phrase: "We forget to be free, we forget to be full, we forget to belong." Then a single image held on screen, a map, not of a city, of a neural network, a mind, his. And at the very center, a blinking red light. Marked, the screen went black. Then one final message burned onto it. "The archive still needs a librarian." The last one tried to leave. "You watched his tape. You're next." Suddenly, Sam couldn't move. His body locked. Muscles froze. He looked down at his hands. Ink spreading again. Fast, this time not just on the skin, but under it, like it was rewriting him. His vision blurred, hevered. The walls of his apartment peeled away like theater props. Behind them, the shelves, the lights, the endless corridors. He stumbled backward, hit the wall, except there was no wall anymore. He turned, the chair, waiting for him. Different this time. No longer a desk, no objects, just a single black chair in the center of a spotlight. He felt the pull. His legs moved without permission. As he sat, the shelves around him closed, like a vault. From every corner, voices echoed, familiar but wrong. "You should have left the box sealed. You remembered too much. You played the tape. You let us in. You wanted this. You were always going to come back." He screamed, but no sound came, because now he was being stored. His body turned to paper, his thoughts to tags, his soul cataloged. and at the center of his chest, carved in by unseen tools, the label appeared: Sam Whitaker, the one who remembered the wrong thing. A final shelf slid into place, and the light shut off. Cut to a new user, a young woman. Browsing the internet late at night, she stumbles on an old video post. No comments, no description, just titled, "The Archive of Forgotten Things Do Not Watch." She clicks, the screen opens, shows a man sitting in a chair, ink spreading across his skin. He leans forward, looks straight into the camera, and smiles.